There is no tomorrow. There is no tomorrow. There is no tomorrow.
What's been your most memorable interview that you've done and why?
I think my most memorable interview was the very first time I interviewed Mike Tyson. I've talked about this before. This was prior to this was several days before he fought Andrew Golota in Detroit in Auburn Hills.
Oh yeah.
And so I had gone to Detroit to cover the fight. Now the fight was on a Friday. It was a pay-per-view. This was in like Mike's Looney Tune times. Like he was just terrible with the press. He was extremely belligerent, very, very difficult to deal with. Really wasn't doing almost any print interviews. The internet was not even relevant at that point in terms of interviews. It was still in its infancy. He hated most of the media guys who covered him for years, who he had bad relationships with, particularly from the East Coast. I had struck up a relationship with Shelly Finkel, who at the time was Mike's manager. And so I would talk to him and, get some information, write different things about some of the events and fighters that his guys were involved in. And so I started to talk about the Tyson thing that was coming up. He was going to be fighting Golota. And, you try to lay the groundwork. And I got to a point where he was comfortable with me. He knew what the goal was. They were trying to promote a pay-per-view, so they needed like some publicity. Obviously, it's not just because I'm a nice guy. I was working for the biggest newspaper in the country as the national boxing writer.
Right.
So we had come to an agreement that Mike would do an interview with me. Like it was going to be, he said to me, this is going to be Mike's only one-on-one print interview before this fight.
Wow.
So we made the arrangements, and I'm going to Detroit, and we're supposed to meet whatever the day. I think it was maybe on Tuesday or Monday. Remember, the fight's on a Friday. And I'm going to, and we knew ahead of time, this is going to be the cover story in USA Today. It may wind up on the front page of the paper, but probably it's going to be on the front page of the sports section, a couple of days before the fight, which obviously was good for them because they need a vehicle to help promote their event. Now, the idea was let's put Mike in a positive frame of mind. Like I'm going to write what he says, so we're going to put him in a comfortable position. So he comes off well. It's going to be tranquil. It's going to be me, Mike. At the time, Tommy Brooks was his trainer.
I remember Tommy, yep.
His publicist, and Finkel. Those are the ground rules of who's going to be in the room. We're going to do it at Mike's hotel. He's going to be in a comfortable position. And I get a call. Mike doesn't want to. Mike's not in the mood. Okay, and now here we go. But he'll talk to you tomorrow morning at breakfast. No problem. I'll come to the hotel. Tell me what time you need me to be there because we were staying in different locations. And that would be fine. Get the call. Mike doesn't want to do the interview at breakfast. He'll talk to you after the press conference. We'll go and we'll get a spot, in where they had the press conference. Now I'm getting a little concerned, not because the interview might get screwed up, but because I'm going to be on deadline and I want to have as much time as I can to write the piece.
Mm-hmm.
So now I'm feeling good because we get to where the press conference is, and I know we're supposed to do the press conference. We're supposed to do the press conference, and Mike and I are supposed to have the time after the press conference. They carved out like a half an hour for me. But he introduces me to Tyson at the press conference before it starts. So this is the first time I've met Mike in person. Shelly introduces us, backstage at the press conference, shakes my hand, smiles. We'll do the interview. He was in a good mood. Great. I'm like, now I'm feeling very confident, and I'm happy that this is going to get done because I'm getting a little antsy. Now the press conference ends, and Shelly says, Mike doesn't want to do the interview now. He wants to go to the gym first. Okay, come with us to the gym.
Oh,
sounds good. We go to the gym. I'm the only media guy let in there. There was no other media around. Now, I thought Mike's just going to skip rope, hit the bag, do whatever. No. Mike's going to spar. This is like 3 days before the fight. Guys don't spar 3 days before the fight.
Wow.
He sparred 4 rounds with a sparring partner named Jeff Pegues. I'm sitting on a metal folding chair with my arms on the ring mat. And I watched Mike beat the living shit out of this man for 4 rounds. And I mean beat the living shit out of him. I mean, they're wearing headgear and they're wearing the bigger gloves. But he laid an absolute beating on Jeff Pegues. Like he was taking out every ounce of frustration, whatever was going on in his life, on this man. And he storms out of the ring. He's a sweaty mess, like snorting like a bull in a ring ready to go out for a bullfight. And Shelly's like, hey, Dan, now we're going to go do the interview. I'm like, oh, Jesus Christ. Are you kidding me? Now, we're at this place called the Brewster Center, the Brewster Recreation Center, if my memory serves. It's a very famous but very old gym in a really downtrodden neighborhood in Detroit. It's where Joe Louis used to train. Very famous place if you're familiar with the Detroit boxing legacy.
Yep.
They take me down to the basement of the gym. George, there's a light hanging on the ceiling like you're in a police interrogation room. Okay. They sit Tyson down on the chair, and now it's Tyson, me, Finkel, Tommy Brooks, the publicists, and the other guys that were there at the gym with him, like his guys. Zab Judah was there, who was on.
Oh, wow.
Him. You got the other guys who were there in the gym who had been working out, and they're sitting them behind me. It was very intimidating. And it's like showtime. And Tyson and I are literally, George, when I tell you this, we're knee to knee on these folding chairs. Now, it starts off really well because Mike and I are from the same area. I'm not from Bed-Stuy in Brooklyn, but where he was in Catskill is not that far from where I grew up. He fought a lot of his early professional fights in the capital region of New York, Albany, Schenectady, Troy. That's where I'm from. That's where my family still lives, whatever. So I kind of break the ice with that, like, hey, this was before the interview officially starts, but like, you remember this place, you ever go to this mall, this restaurant? Like, and so he was like, he felt comfortable because I'm from the same area where he was very familiar with. So we get off to a very good start in that respect. And I still, somewhere in my vast amounts of boxing crap, I still have the micro cassette of this interview somewhere. I have to dig that out someday.
Wow.
I don't remember what I asked him exactly, but it went downhill. And so what was supposed to be like the kinder, gentler Mike Tyson turns into an absolute train wreck. Okay. Like just a complete disaster, to the point where he tells me he hates white people, he hates the media, that he threatens my life at least twice. He calls my my ringside colleague Wally Matthews a reptilian piece of. He's going off on Don King, and then he finally gets to a point where he's so irritated by it wasn't like I was not asking like difficult or monumental kinds of questions. He starts poking me in the chest, and it's like he's gonna swing at me. I'm not like nervous, but I'm like, this is gonna go downhill real quick. We're like maybe 10 minutes into this thing, and
this was 10 minutes in,
if that, maybe 10 minutes, 12 minutes.
Wow.
And he gets so pissed off that he stands up and he throws the metal folding chair against the wall, like just not like picks it up, but shoves it with his arm. And at that point, we're all, me and Tommy and Finkel and the publicist were like looking at each other like, okay, they're like, that's it. And you ever see like a movie where like there's a threat to the president and they pick him up and they drag him up the stairs, like physically? Yep. That's what this was like. Tyson's security detail like lifts me by the elbows and we go up the stairs and they put me in the limo, and I'm in the limo for a few minutes, and then Finkel and Tommy Brooks, and there was one of the guys in Mike's team who was one of his Albany guys for many, many years, named trying to remember his name. That was also Jay Bright, was one of his longtime.
Okay. Yep.
And I was friendly with Jay. Jay was a cool guy. So we all get in the limo, and it was an outright disaster. We didn't even bring up the interview because everybody was there and knew what a disaster this was. It was a real quiet trip from the gym to their hotel.
I imagine.
I call up my buddy on the phone on my cell, and I'm like, dude, you're never going to believe where I am. He goes, you're in Detroit, aren't you? There covering the Tyson. But I said, no, I mean specifically. I said, I'm in Mike Tyson's limousine. I just had the worst interview of my career, and they're taking me back to my hotel. I go back to the hotel. Now I got to work with what I've got. My editors at USA Today are still expecting a freaking Mike Tyson cover story. I'm like, okay. So I had enough to write and to go on, and I had talked to, set the scene, and then whatever. It was there, already had been there now for 2 days. The story comes out, then like, I forget if it was the next day or the day after that, but the story comes out in the paper, and the headline, again, we were hoping for kinder, gentler Tyson, right? The headline in USA Today that day is, I'll never forget this, Full Force Tyson, I hate everybody. And that was the piece that ran in the paper. And the piece itself, I was okay with it. It wasn't like I was upset with how it came out, but I was disappointed that it was not what we had hoped for in terms of putting, and again, I never knew what Mike was going to say or how he's going to answer questions, but I was disappointed that it devolved to that situation for reasons that were not necessary. So that is a memorable interview. But I'll give you a postscript to that, George. The postscript is this. So that's October. He gets the fight out of the way. He wins by stoppage. It turns into a no contest because he fails a test for marijuana. So that's October of 2000, I believe. Fast forward now, March-ish 2001. So what, we're talking like 5-6 months later, I'm in Las Vegas to cover Holyfield, John Ruiz. I can't remember if it's the first fight or the second fight.
Yeah.
They take myself and like 6 or 7 other writers to Tyson's mansion that's off the strip in Vegas to interview him, because there's a lot of conversation, George, that he's going to fight the winner of that fight for the WBA title. So we're looking either at Tyson, John Ruiz, or perhaps a third fight with Evander Holyfield. And so we're waiting around for Mike to come out of his bedroom, and we're like mingling. We had like breakfast and brunch and coffee and bagels and the whole thing. And we're just hanging around. And so I'm standing with a couple of the guys, and Tyson finally comes out to grace us with his presence. And he walks right over to where I'm standing. It was me and a couple of the writers. And he says hello, and he looks me over. He didn't really know me. The only time I ever met him was, 5 months earlier in Detroit for, the miserable interview, and for a few minutes at the press conference before the fight, before the press conference. He taps me on the shoulder, on my chest with the back of his hand. He looks me up and down, doesn't say a word. So that was my signal. Like, we're cool. Like, don't sweat it. I remember that disaster. We're good. I never had another crossword with Mike Tyson in the 20 plus years that I've dealt with him since then.
Wow.